I remember the village of Mangojo as if it were etched into my heart. The sun was always fierce, baking the earth with its heat, but the cool shade beneath the wide branches of the baobab tree was always a relief. The sound of the river Oko murmured in the distance, and the scent of ripened mangoes and fresh-tilled soil filled the air. But amidst this beauty, there was something wrong in the home of Amina and her family. Amina, a quiet child, often sat alone. I would watch her from across the village, sitting near the river or on the steps of her home, her fingers tracing patterns in the sand. She didn't play with the other children, and she rarely smiled. Her eyes always seemed distant, as if her soul was somewhere far away, disconnected from the world around her. It wasn't until I heard the whispers from the other villagers that I began to suspect something was wrong. Amina had begun to change. She no longer played outside, no longer greeted the children with her usual warmth. Her once bright eyes were now dull and heavy with something that wasn't quite visible. One evening, as the sun sank low in the sky, I saw Binta and Baba having a heated argument. Binta's face was flushed with frustration, her words sharp. "You don't understand. I have to provide for us all. You don't know how hard I work, Baba," she snapped. But Baba, always calm, remained silent. His gaze was empty as he stared at the ground. Later that night, when the village was quiet, I overheard something that chilled my soul. Amina's voice, faint and trembling, reached me from the cracks in their hut. "Mama, please, don't let him do this. It hurts." I could not ignore it. But what could I do? I was just another child in the village. No one would listen to me, just as no one was listening to Amina. Amina's cries continued, and I watched helplessly as she withdrew further into herself. She no longer came to the village gatherings or helped with the small chores around the house. Her face was always pale, and I could see the fear in her eyes whenever Baba came near. Yet her mother remained oblivious, too absorbed in her work. One afternoon I passed by their house and saw Amina standing in the doorway, her hands shaking. She had finally mustered the courage to speak, but her voice trembled with fear. "Mama," she whispered, her words almost lost to the wind. Binta didn't even look up from her ledger. "Not now, Amina," she replied, too busy counting her earnings to acknowledge her daughter. Amina stood there for a moment, her lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came. She simply turned and walked away, her small feet barely making a sound as she disappeared into the house. That night, as I sat with the elders under the baobab tree, I could not shake the image of Amina's face. A few weeks passed and I saw no improvement, but then one day everything changed. Binta came home early for the first time in years and found Baba alone in the house, but Amina was nowhere to be found. The shop had closed early that day and something felt wrong. When Binta opened the door to the house, she froze. In the dim light of their hut, she saw Baba, her husband, in a position no father should ever be with his child. The world seemed to stop, and for the first time, Binta saw what Amina had been trying to tell her all along. "No, no, what is this?" Binta cried, her voice breaking as she rushed forward to pull Baba away from Amina. Amina lay limp on the floor, her face pale and tear-streaked, her eyes wide in shock and fear. For the first time, Binta understood the truth. She cradled her daughter in her arms, her heart torn with guilt. How could she have been so blind? "I failed you," Binta whispered through her tears, but Amina didn't answer. She simply held on to her mother's arms, too exhausted to speak. The once vibrant girl had become a ghost of herself. With the help of the village elders, Baba was taken away. He denied the accusations, claiming that his wife had neglected him, that he had no other choice. But the elders, wise in their knowledge of the land and the people, did not believe him. He was removed from the village, never to return. The next few days were filled with grief. The villagers gathered, offering their support to Amina. Binta, now broken with guilt, stayed by her daughter's side, determined to make things right. She sought the help of Dada Kesi, the healer and elder of the village, who used traditional methods to begin the healing process. Slowly, Amina began to speak again, though her voice was softer than before. Binta, now seeing the error of her ways, closed her fabric shop and devoted herself entirely to Amina. She learned to listen, to be present, to truly see her daughter for the first time. Together, they began the long road to healing. Amina didn't return to her old self overnight. Her laughter was quieter now, and she would often sit by the river, watching the water flow, as if it could wash away her pain. But with time, and with the love and support of her community, Amina found her way back. The once broken girl was slowly mending piece by piece, like the intricate fabric that Binta had once woven. Binta, too, learned that no amount of work or material wealth could replace the love and attention that her child needed. The lesson was painful, but she was determined not to let her daughter carry the burden of silence any longer. This story serves as a reminder that a mother's love is not just in providing for the family, but in being present and listening to the ones we love. Sometimes we are blind to the suffering of those closest to us, but it is never too late to open our hearts and ears. For love and healing can always be found when we choose to see the truth.